What's up, everybody? Clint Lamb, Bama Insider, here to talk about the transfer portal additions for Alabama through the first couple of weeks of fall camp. So the first guy that we'll talk about is Eli Ricks, the transfer cornerback from LSU. And the big question with this guy has been, is he going to actually start? You know, and at one time, that was probably considered a very ludicrous statement. But as we've continued to work our way through not only the spring, but the summer and now into fall camp, him not being a starter after being a freshman All-American at LSU a couple of years ago doesn't seem quite as absurd. Why? Because the transition has been a little bit more difficult on Ricks than some of these other transfers. You know, transitioning from LSU's culture under Ed Orgeron to Alabama under Nick Saban, it's going to be a culture shock for sure. You're talking about new teammates, you're talking about new coaches, a new defense, new defensive system, plus you're talking about new expectations. That's a lot for any player, but when you're looking at the cornerback position specifically, it's an even bigger ask because Alabama actually asks more of its corners than a lot of other defenses and programs. So Ricks can have all the talent and natural ability in the world, but he has to be able to do his job consistently or he's not going to play. It's that simple. The good news is that once it starts to click for this guy, I do think that he can be Alabama's best cornerback. He's a true outside corner with prototypical length at 6'2", 190 pounds. He's got great instincts that allow him to take chances and to be a playmaker, which is something that we actually saw quite a bit at LSU. It's what made him such a desirable player, not only coming out of high school as a five-star prospect, but also when he was wanting to transfer from LSU. And the fact that Ricks has taken a little bit more time to develop is concerning fans, and I really don't think that it should. Number one, some guys it just takes longer, and the cornerback position, like I said, it's a very demanding position for Alabama's program, but also just guys develop differently at different paces, and there's nothing wrong with that. And the good news here is that Alabama has some other talent at that position that can help bridge the gap or give him more time to be able to get things figured out. You've got Kool-Aid McKinstry, you've got Kyrie Jackson. Once he's able to return from his groin injury that held him out of the first scrimmage, he's going to be not only in that competition, but might even end up starting. Then you also have Terrion Arnold, a former five-star prospect, who was one of the top safeties in the country, had played a lot of safety in high school. He made the transition to corner. It's been somewhat of a slow transition, but now he's starting to figure things out, and you can really see it making a difference for him on the field. And Nick Saban's talked about the performance that he had. In fact, Arnold was the one that was starting opposite Kool-Aid McKinstry during the first scrimmage on Saturday, not Eli Ricks. He's working with the second team. So even with Kyrie Jackson out, it was Arnold, it was Kool-Aid, and even if that ends up being your starting two in week one, I don't think that's the end of the world. But like I said, once Ricks figures it out, he's going to be a very good player, so give him a little bit of time. The next player on the list is going to be Jermaine Burton, the wide receiver out of Georgia, who is trying to become Alabama's number one receiver this season. And we actually got to talk to Jermaine for the first time since transferring to Alabama on Monday. And let me say it was a great interview. And one of the questions that it was asked was what was behind his decision to transfer to Alabama from Georgia. And his response was fairly simple. He said, I'm just trying to make the best decision I can for me and my family. And then he went on to, change the subject and pretty much talk about how much he appreciates Alabama for welcoming him with open arms. It was a very Alabama answer, but I do think that there are some things that we can take away from that first comment, that first sentence. This is a guy who is trying to make the best decision for him and his family. What I think is that he was trying to seek out an offense that was going to give him more opportunities and better quarterback play to position him better for the NFL. And let's face it, Bryce Young is clearly a better quarterback than Stetson Bennett. I'm not saying that Stetson Bennett's a bad quarterback. He's a fierce competitor, underrated in a lot of ways, but he's not Bryce Young, and the numbers reflect that. Not only is Bryce Young the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, he was number 3 in pass attempts, he was number 2 in passing yardage, number 2 in passing touchdowns, and he's projected to be a top 5 pick in next April's NFL draft. Alabama's offense as a whole, number 6 in scoring offense, number 7 in passing offense. Now let's compare that to some of these numbers for Stetson Bennett. Number 79 in pass attempts, granted in 14 games, not 15, but still number 79 in pass attempts, number 44 in passing yardage, number 16 in passing touchdowns with 29. But also keep in mind that 18 of those 29 touchdown passes went to a position other than wide receiver. Even though Jermaine Burton was one of Georgia's top pass catchers or top receivers the last couple of years, this is a guy in 2 years has not broken 1,000 career receiving yards. He has just over 50 career catches, and he barely has over 80 career targets in 2 years. For comparison, Alabama had 2 of its wide receivers, Jameson Williams and John Mechie, both get over 100-plus targets just last season alone. So you can't blame Jermaine Burton for wanting to find greener pastures. He wants to find an offense that can highlight his skill set and give him the best chance to be successful as far as his NFL draft stock and not only getting to the next level, but being good at the next level. And Georgia just wasn't doing it for him. When you look at Alabama, 5 first-round receivers in the last 3 years, on top of having the number 44 overall pick in John Mechie this past year, so 2 top 44 selections in each of the last 3 drafts. Georgia hadn't had a top 50 receiver selected since A.J. Green in 2011. So I don't really think we can fault the guy. Now, is he going to be a Henry Ruggs or a Jameson Williams or a Devontae Smith or a Jalen Waddle or a Jerry Jeudy? No. I don't think he has the same ceiling as some of those other guys. I think he's a little bit more limited athletically, but that's okay. That's not a problem. He can still position himself better for the NFL in Tuscaloosa. So fully expect him to be Alabama's number 1 receiver this upcoming season. He's going to catch a lot of balls. He's going to make some plays, some big plays and some big moments. Keep an eye on Jermaine Burton. Now, the next guy on the list is Jahmyr Gibbs, the transfer running back from Georgia Tech. And I mean, already, guys, he's instantly become Alabama's number 1 running back. He brings so much to the offense that Alabama has really not seen maybe ever during the Nick Saban era. Because not only is he going to be that kind of home run explosive player, just a dynamic player with the football in his hands, but he also is going to get significant volume. The comparisons to Kenyon Drake are fine from a skill set standpoint to some degree, but Kenyon Drake always had guys in front of him, including Derrick Henry. He was playing second fiddle. Jahmyr Gibbs is the guy. He can run, he can catch, and he can make an impact in the return game. Smooth runner with good patience, but doesn't shy away from contact. I think that's very important. He's got great vision with a lot of natural, creative instincts. And not only can this guy catch the football out of the backfield, but you can line him up in the slot, and he can make catches beyond 10 to 15 yards. He's such a mismatch problem that you can move around and have a little bit of fun with. And by being able to move him around and play him some at receiver, you can get Jace McClellan, you can get Roydell Williams, Trey Sanders, you can get other running backs in the mix in the backfield because you can move Jahmyr Gibbs around. Now, one of the big question marks that we still have about Gibbs, his pass protection. And it's not that he's not good in that area. We don't know if he's good. We don't know if he's bad. We haven't seen him a ton. And granted, the limited that we have seen him, I think there's some areas, some room for improvement. But Georgia Tech ranked outside of the top 100 last year in pass attempts per game, I think with 372. So it's not that he's not capable of being a good pass protector. He just hadn't had a whole lot of opportunities to do it yet. But what we do know about Jahmyr Gibbs is that he's going to be playing in a much different offense just from a game script perspective than he did last year or the last 2 years for Georgia Tech. He was used to playing from behind a ton while he was with the Yellow Jackets. At Alabama, a lot of the time, he's going to be playing with the lead. He's going to be in an offense that's playing with the lead. And while we do know that he was fantastic when playing from behind in that type of game script, we also trust Alabama's coaching staff to be creative enough and get him involved enough to be able to still be a very impactful player playing with the lead. So I'm not concerned about it, that aspect. This guy is not only going to be one of the best running backs in the country, he's going to be one of the best playmakers, the best offensive playmakers, and the best players in college football. Next up on the list is Tyler Harrell, the transfer wide receiver from Louisville. He's in kind of a similar situation to Eli Ricks in the sense that he has had a little bit of trouble transitioning from Louisville to Alabama. And that happens sometimes. Does that mean that he's not going to be able to contribute to Alabama this year? No. He just might not be contributing in the way that a lot of people had hoped or expected in week 1 against Utah State or week 2 against Texas. It might take him a little bit more time, kind of where things are trending with Eli Ricks as well on the defense side of the football. Obviously, his biggest attribute is his speed, especially when getting vertical, stretching defenses vertically. He reportedly ran a 4.24 40-yard dash at Louisville's Pro Day while averaging 29.2 yards per catch and bringing in 6 touchdowns on only 18 receptions. That is an extremely efficient player. But I do think that he needs to add a little bit more to his arsenal as far as his route tree is concerned. You'll see a lot of go routes, a lot of skinny posts, things like that. But I would like to see him do a little bit more and become a little bit more diversified as far as his route tree. In fact, that's one of the big differences that I've seen between him and Henry Ruggs. Ruggs, while he was at Alabama, very diversified as far as his route tree is concerned. And with Harrell being more of a one-trick pony, right now, that might be limiting his opportunities to get on the field. the coaching staff might be asking a little bit more of him now. I don't know that that's the case. It's purely speculation, but it's possible. Learning the playbook, getting chemistry down with Bryce Young, proving that he can be more than just simply being a vertical field stretcher, even though I do think that was a major reason why he was brought to Alabama in the first place. Need to see a little bit more out of Tyler Harrell. But I fully believe that he will be a part of Alabama's offense this year, and you will see number 8 making some catches and making some plays at some point. It's just going to take a little bit more time. And the last guy on the list is Tyler Steen, the offensive tackle out of Vanderbilt, a 3-year starter in the SEC. And from what sources have told Bama Insider, he's really taken a hold of that left tackle job. In fact, he really, at this point, is his to lose. And when you look at the scrimmage results, that actually backs that up. Steen was working with the first-team offense. You had Amari Kite working with the second-team offense. And you had Ken Randolph, who had been involved in that competition throughout the spring, into the summer, and even a little bit into fall camp. He was working at left guard. Now, that doesn't mean that that's set. It's possible with this next scrimmage that we see Ken Randolph working with the first team at left tackle. So I don't think anything has been completely locked up, and it's a guarantee, but I do think things are trending in that direction. And what is Alabama getting with Tyler Steen? I think they're getting a 6'5", 315-pound, experienced offensive tackle who has good drops in his pass sets. He's got a solid punch, really physical, very aggressive blocker, almost too aggressive at times. And he does tend to overextend himself in pass protection a little bit. He's still improving his technique. But this is where I think Eric Walford, the new offensive line coach, can play such a major role in unlocking his true potential. I mean, when you look at it between Tyler Steen and the emergence of J.C. Latham at right tackle, I think Alabama fans should feel pretty good about that tackle duo heading into the year. And that's huge. When you compare it to last year and how much of a hindrance that was, not just the offensive line, but when you look at the tackle combination in particular, Evan Neal was really good, but the right tackle spot left a lot to be desired. So getting this combination of talent and the fact that they're both stepping up and we're hearing great things coming out of fall camp for both Steen and Latham, that's big. Obviously, injuries at the wide receiver position did play a part in Alabama losing the national title game. But just because that played a role does not mean that poor offensive line play wasn't the biggest factor in Alabama struggling at times prior to the national championship game, and why they couldn't give Bryce Young enough time for some of those young receivers that they were asking to do a whole lot, step up in a national title game, were not being given enough time to get open. If Bryce Young gets more protection, that's a lot easier to do on those young guys. It was a bad combination. Georgia exploited it, and Alabama lost the game. But the first step in fixing that problem is getting consistent play, not just at one tackle spot, but both tackle spots. So the bottom line with these transfers, you've got guys who have come in and they've kind of taken hold and things have seemed to click. That happens. We saw it with Henry To'oTo'o last year. He came in, almost immediately became the starting inside linebacker. You saw Jameson Williams come in and almost immediately become a starter and an impact player against Miami in week 1. The guys who were on that kind of trend, Jahmyr Gibbs, Tyler Steen, and Jermaine Burton. Eli Ricks and Tyler Harrell. Sometimes other guys take a little bit longer. That happens. I think fans need to be patient with those guys because I still think both players can have a significant impact on Alabama's season. It's just going to take a little bit more time for them to develop, and that's okay.